Welcome back to Movie Rewind. Today we will be looking back at the movie Careful What You Wish For. Stay alert, spoilers ahead. Do take care. The movie opens with Doug heading towards a town with his family. He's reading a book when a breathtaking view of the beach grabs his attention. They begin unloading their belongings as soon as they get to the summer home. Their house is next to the docking area of some boats. Doug goes down there to meet one of his friends, who informs him about the women who have just arrived and how easy it would be for them to get laid that summer. When Doug gets home, he is the only one there. He climbs the stairs to his room and is looking at some pictures when he notices a new couple has moved in next door. He tries to get a look at the wife, but she enters the house. The woman is Lena, and she looks up to catch Doug staring at her. Later, when he is riding his bicycle, he sees Lena bending over to brush the sand out of her shoes. Doug then visits his friend and they resume talking about women. When he gets home, his father calls him over to meet the new neighbors. Doug is informed by Elliot that his father has told him he knows a lot about boats. Elliot then extends an invitation for him to visit his new boat and says he might even hire him to take care of it. Doug sees Lena returning from a swim when he goes to inspect the boat the following day. He keeps watching her as she goes to take a shower. When Elliot comes, Doug explains that the damage on the boat is mostly cosmetic, so he can handle it. Elliot says that he will be leaving town for some time and then proceeds to talk about his salary. They settle on $12, after which Elliot says he would have paid him $20. Later, Doug is staring out of his window at his neighbor's home. He sees Lena changing but only turns away when Elliot comes in and tries to force himself on her. The following day, Elliot is on his way to the waterfront when he is stopped by a guard who demands that he show identification. Doug approaches Elliot and says that the guard needs to be a little strict, and Elliot simply responds, "I like it this way." While the two are standing on his boat, Doug inquires about how Elliot acquired all of these possessions. Elliot replied that it was all possible due to his wealth and attractiveness. The following day, Doug shares the details of his encounters with his friend. He warns Doug not to get involved because Elliot doesn't seem like the kind of person Doug would want to mess with. Doug runs into Lena as she's relaxing on her porch on the way home from work. She has locked herself out of the house and needs help getting in. She instructs him to get a rock so he can break the back window, go inside, and open the door. She instructs him to keep it a secret as well. Doug is able to enter and open the door for her. After she extends an invitation, they begin conversing. After some time, the two start kissing, leading to a steamy sexual encounter. The following morning, Lena praises him for his performance the night before. Later, he visits his friend, who tries to show him a couple of potential partners, but Doug ignores him. Later, Lena approaches him while he is working on the boat and says that her husband asked her to check on him. As they board the boat, Lena removes her clothing and seduces him. They start kissing and eventually have sex again. The following day, Doug sees Elliot stopping next to his store while passing by on his bicycle. He finds Lena inside the store. They go through to the back door and start having sex, but Elliot enters the shop in search of Lena, and this causes them to stop. Before heading back, Lena gives Doug a kiss. Later, Elliot examines the boat that Doug was on. He points out an oversight in the repairs, but also encourages Doug. He explains to Doug that he reminds him of himself. Elliot has to leave town again, and Doug takes advantage of this by meeting up with Lena. The two have an intimate conversation. At some point, Lena gives him a phone. She explains that Elliot is becoming more paranoid, so that phone would facilitate their conversations going forward. They go to the kitchen, but this is when the gardener notices them. Doug visits the waterfront later, but finds Elliot standing next to his boat. He also sees Lena inside. Doug is asked by Elliot to launch the boat so they can test how seaworthy it is. Lena takes Doug aside for a moment and tells him that she is considering a divorce. Later that evening, he gets a tearful phone call from Lena. She tells him that Elliot attacked her before storming out. Doug takes her to the hospital. She refuses to call the police even though he urges her to. The following day, he is working when he gets a call from Lena. They meet up and eventually have sex in a boat shack. When he gets home, he notices that Elliot is back, but then Lena calls him and informs him that she requires his assistance. Doug rushes over to her home and finds Elliot dead. Lena explains that during their altercation, she hit him on the head with something to protect herself. Lena tells him that she can't get into trouble and asks what she should do. Doug responds by telling her that they will figure it out and must act normally. He goes to work at the bar and has a normal day, only to find Lena at his house speaking with his parents. Lena apologizes for dropping by when he visits her home later that evening. Doug suggests that they make it seem like an accident, but Lena explains that this won't work, so Doug develops a new plan. He moves Elliot's body to his boat and tells Lena to call the police to report a domestic fight, after which Elliot storms out of the house. He also pretends to be Elliot on the boat, and it works because a security guard sees him from afar and addresses him as Mr. Harper. Doug had used a beam of the ship to injure Elliot again, then proceeded to light the boat on fire with cigarettes and alcohol. The next morning, the police are looking into what seems to be an accident. However, a woman drove into town and met with the police, preventing the case from being resolved. She tells them that the LA Trust is treating the case seriously because Elliot had a sizable insurance fund that is now going to Lena. The woman is bent on investigating thoroughly. She interrogates Lena and finds the broken window that Doug caused and brings the samples in for analysis. At this point, it is evident that Lena's entire strategy was to make Doug the prime suspect in Elliot's murder. When the agent gets to Doug's house, he asks about the time Lena visited them. His mother picks up on her tone and questions. She informs the agent that she cannot frame her son. Later, the detective tells Doug that she needs his fingerprints and a mouth swab. Doug makes an effort to prove his innocence, but Lena obstructs him every time. At the watershed, he also runs into Lena. He tries to get her to tell the truth, but she starts yelling at him and tries to make it look like an attempted rape. Doug is detained but manages to escape. He is convinced that if he can just get his hands on Lena's phone, he can clear his name. He goes to Lena's motel to steal her cell phone, but then Lena and the agent walk in and catch him. He pleads that the phone can prove his innocence, but the two women walk away with it. As they continue to walk away, Doug notices they both have identical tattoos. At this point, Doug realizes that the agent is Lena's lover and has been helping her from the beginning. When everything comes back to him, he understands that he was only a pawn in a larger scheme. Lena initially seems like she'll leave Doug to deal with the charges, but in a final act of love, she decides to leave the cell phone with the exonerating evidence behind. After making away with Elliot's insurance fund claim, Lena and her lover are seen escaping on a plane. The movie ends with Doug explaining how he was ultimately imprisoned, albeit for a brief period of time and on less serious charges.